Inclusive language is really about opening our minds and messages to the realities of life. We work, live, and play among men and women of all ages and backgrounds. Our writing needs to reflect reality, so we should ensure that our language is inclusive rather than restrictive, open rather than closed. Don't make all nurses and administrative professionals she, nor all doctors and senior executives he. We can get very tangled up in gender and slow down reading when we write he, she, s, he and or she. But we do need a way to reflect we are making a conscious decision to use language that is inclusive. One straightforward way to eliminate gender bias is to recast the sentence in the plural. Rather than, each employee should shut off his computer before leaving, write, employees should shut off their computers before leaving. Another possibility is to delete the personal pronoun. If an employee is late, notify his immediate supervisor, becomes, if an employee is late, notify the immediate supervisor. Here are some common terms and their inclusive version. The two basic rules for constructing sentences are: use construction that makes meaning clear and keep construction parallel. Parallel construction means that parts of a sentence that are parallel or balanced in meaning should be parallel or balanced in structure. For example, if you write, she likes swimming, running, and to play the piano, to play the piano is a different construction from swimming and running. Write, she likes swimming, running, and playing the piano, to make the activities parallel in structure. When Shakespeare has Hamlet say, to die, to sleep, perchance to dream, he is using parallel structure. Parallelism refers to a series of like grammatical structures, words, phrases, and clauses, expressed in repeated grammatical construction. Now change the following sentences to the correct parallel structure. Use your workbook for this exercise. Commas are the most common punctuation mark inside a sentence. However, the trend today is to use them only when absolutely necessary, or when omitting the comma would cause confusion. Use a comma after a long introductory phrase or clause. After working all day at the office, I went home for dinner. If the introductory material is short, forget the comma. After work I went home for dinner. Use a comma if the sentence would be confusing without it, like this: the day before, I borrowed my boss's calculator. Use a comma to separate elements in a series, including numbers in a list. I enjoy drinking orange juice, tea, milk, and coffee. You also use it with numbers 5, 7, and 9. There are some style guides that omit the comma before and, but you'll notice that we like it. The important thing is to make sure that you are being consistent, and that you use what your organization is using. Use a comma to separate independent clauses that are joined by and, but, or, nor, for, or yet. We shopped for 3 hours, but we didn't make a single purchase. Use a commas to set off non-essential elements in a sentence. Compare these two sentences. In this sentence, at the podium stood a man wearing a green suit. The phrase, wearing a green suit, is essential to identify which man. However, in this sentence, at the podium stood Frank, wearing a green suit. The phrase, wearing a green suit, adds non-essential information about Frank. The semicolon sometimes raises people's blood pressure, but it is a very useful punctuation mark. A semicolon has 3 important features shown here. It can also be used to separate 2 closely related sentences not joined by a conjunction. The semicolon in this instance is useful for showing contrast or balance. For example, having more work to do is relatively easy to bear, What stings is having more to do than everyone else. It should also be used to separate a series that is complicated or whose items containing internal punctuation, such as commas. This punctuation mark is used primarily to call attention to the words that follow it. Here are some common examples. Use an apostrophe when the meaning of it's is it is. Using it's when the word does not mean it is one of the most common mistakes in the English language. Note that it's never correct to use an apostrophe in a possessive version of it's. This means that anytime you see it's with an apostrophe after the s, it is incorrect. Use an apostrophe to show singular possession. The doctor's office was always busy, and plural possession. The doctor's offices were always busy. For example, the use of an apostrophe can be determined by inserting in a phrase, as in, the offices of the doctors were busy. Business letters represent a direct communication between one person and another. You have an opportunity to make a good impression for you and your company, to take the reader's needs into account, and to be courteous, positive, and professional. These steps will help you to write more effective business letters. Determine the appropriate length. Keep your letters short and efficient. Most things we send are only scanned because our reading piles are so high. If you really want your letter read thoroughly, keep it short. Assess the situation and your objectives. Why are you writing? Assess your reader and your relationship with them. Then assess how you want to appear to the reader and what you want to happen. Time spent on preparation is time saved later, and helps ensure a more effective letter. There are 3 important parts to this step. Decide the purpose of the letter. What do you want to achieve? Have action taken about a complaint? Have an instruction carried out by a deadline? Decide who to write to if it is not obvious, e.g., if you are initiating a complaint. Obtain all the information, facts you need before starting to write. Decide what to say. Only when it's clear in your mind can it be clear in the reader's mind. The reader might be tired, busy, or distracted. Try dealing with one point at a time and in a logical order. Make sure that you give the letter a structure. The beginning sets the scene for the reader, such as a reference to a previous letter and explanation of the purpose of the letter. The body of the letter sets out the key points, and the end of the letter indicates the next step that should be taken, by whom, and by when. Put your thoughts in sequence. Divide your thoughts into groups, with a clear paragraph for each thought. This will tell the reader when the writer has finished one thought before going on to the next. Long paragraphs are hard to read and hard to digest. If you need to use a longer paragraph, consider using numbered sub-paragraphs to help with clarity. Identify your subject. Address the letter correctly. Whenever possible, use the person's name in both the address and the salutation. That's one way of making your letter more personal. End by pointing the way ahead. Make it easy for the reader to comply with your request with a statement that's aimed at telling the reader what comes next. The last one is a bit tricky. How do you begin a letter when you are answering for somebody else? You could say, I am writing on behalf of XYZ regarding ABC. Here is a sample business letter. Each number is identified on the screen. We can use word choice to our advantage and create letters that have impact. Persuasion techniques are used when you want the reader to do something, but you need to convince them. Here are some guidelines. Another type of letter is where you need to say no. These letters are used so that you can clearly convey your decision and ensure that the reader does not misunderstand your answer or find room to negotiate with you. Let's look at some guidelines. Virtually everyone today uses email to communicate at work and at home. It's fast, easy, and convenient, especially when you can access it from your computer at work and home, and handheld devices. Since we are using email so frequently, and because we often read it off of very small screens, even the way we write emails is changing. Here we cover some points which you should always keep in mind while writing emails. Although email can be great, it can also be a huge time consumer, especially if you are someone who interrupts your own flow of work to check your email. Here are some do's which you need to adhere to. People classify themselves as being good spellers or poor spellers. Good spellers probably didn't get that way without some work and attention, and poor spellers can learn techniques to help make them better spellers. Most of us have a few words that we regularly forget how to spell. However, that doesn't mean we can't produce letters, memos, and reports that are word perfect. Here are some tips for making your documents the best that they can be. Another item that you may have to write for your business is a memo. A memo, short for memorandum, is the traditional way of relaying information through an office in a written form. Let's take a look at a sample memo. When writing memos, the same rules that we have been discussing apply. In addition, memos should be kept short, typically no longer than a page, and should not discuss extremely sensitive information or information that is likely to change. This type of information is better dealt with in person. A memo should also be kept to one topic. We've covered a good amount of material so far in this workshop, so let's look back to the beginning and apply what you've learned so far. This is the type of review that you can do over all your writing projects to make sure that you are producing a document that meets the 4 C's and is the best work that you can do. Here we suggest a checklist you can use.